No longer doubting. Thomas, Jerusalem, Israel, 34 AD. Thomas knocked on the door of the upper room with a secret knock. It was immediately opened, and he stepped inside and shut the door behind him. He was suddenly surrounded by his friends, and they were all talking at once. It was impossible to understand any of them. "Thomas, Thomas! What Mary Magdalene said was true. He is alive." "Thomas, we've seen him." Thomas waved his hands. "Shh! I can't listen to all of you at once. Peter, what has happened?" "Thomas, we saw Jesus. He stood right here in this room with us, and he talked to us." Thomas frowned. "Peter, we've been under a lot of stress. We haven't really slept since Jesus died. You must be imagining things." "All of us imagining the same thing at the same time? I tell you, we saw him. He walked right through the locked door." "He walked through a locked door?" Thomas asked. Everyone nodded. "Well, that explains it. It was a ghost. You didn't see Jesus. You saw a ghost." "Thomas, we know we saw the Master. He showed us the wounds in his hands and his side. Our hearts could feel it was really him." Mary spoke up. "Oh, Thomas, if you'd have been here, you'd know it was him." Thomas shook his head. "Did any of you touch him?" "No." "Then you can't know whether or not it was just a ghost. Believe what you want, but unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and I put my finger where the nails were, and I put my hand into his side, I will not believe it." A week later, Thomas was gathered to the rest of the disciples in the house with the doors locked. And suddenly Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace to you." Jesus focused his attention on Thomas. "Take your finger and examine my hands. Take your hand and stick it in my side. Don't be unbelieving. Believe." Thomas fell to his knees. He didn't have to touch the wounds. He knew it was Jesus, and he cried out, "My Master, my God!" And Jesus smiled. "So you believe because you've seen with your own eyes. Good. But better blessings are in store for those who believe without seeing." Thomas never doubted Jesus again. Later, when the disciples traveled throughout the known world to preach the gospel, Thomas was chosen to go to India and North Africa. Although he dreaded living amongst those savage tribes, God strengthened him, and he was able to convert many in those countries. Around 70 AD, he went to Kalamania, India, where they worshipped an image of the sun. Through the power of God, Thomas destroyed the image and put a stop to their adultery. The sun god's priests were furious, and they accused him before the king, who sentenced him to be tortured with red-hot metal plates and then thrown into a glowing furnace. To the amazement of all, the fire did not hurt Thomas. He was still alive in the midst of the furnace. And when the priests saw this, they were so angry they threw spears and javelins into him at the furnace. And the spears pierced his side, and he fell dead there. Real followers of God know Jesus. Though they may not have seen him with their own eyes, they have felt his power, love, and joy in their lives. He is the living word, and is so real to them that they would never deny him, no matter the cost. So for this account, this story is confirmed by Baptist.net. But I have seen other accounts in the way of that Thomas died. But whenever you look at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as they were saved from the furnace, this account is believable. Regardless of how he was martyred, makes him no less a martyr for Christ.